I only have 500 slides, so relax. When I think of Bob, I think about how perfect a child he was. I mean, he never did anything wrong. My mom used to say, you know, when we get into trouble, she would say, Roger Alvin, you know, trying to get our attention, or Leroy Irvin, or Melvin Raymond, but never Robert Jean, because he never got into trouble. I remember in grade school, I hear words at school, and man, I want to practice those words when I got home. So I would go behind the shed someplace and practice those words, but my mom would find out, and she'd wash my mouth out. Bob never got any of that kind of problem. I think I got spanking just because he was so good. Anyway, one day I asked Mom, I said, you know, Mom, I said, you call me Roger Alvin. I said, what's Bob's middle name? I never did hear you say it. Anyway, she said, why do you ask? I said, you never say it. Anyway, Bob was just really a perfect kid. I imagine you a lot like Terry. I mean, anyway, he couldn't play the piano or anything like that, but he was, even when later on in life, when he became a hospital administrator down in Texas, and Shirley was a nurse, and he was the hospital administrator, he was so fair and so kind. I said, Bob, you got to be tougher. You got to be tough. He said, no. He said, that's not my personality. But he was so kind. Everybody loved him. Everybody in the hospital loved him. He was just really a super hospital administrator. And I'm not going to get into details of what happened. But anyway, I just think that was fantastic. The second thing I want to talk about right quick is every summer we would work for farmers, neighbors or something, and make a little bit of money so we could buy some clothes when school started. So when school was started that year, he was a senior in an academy and I was a freshman. And he said, let's go to town. I said, okay. So we go uptown and probably that store's not there anymore, but we went to the Book Nook first and got a few nuts, warm nuts, really good. And then we went across the street to the Book Nook, to the Beehive. And so Bob bought shirts. He loved shirts. And that was his downfall. He loved shirts. Anyway, he was looking at the shirts there, and there was one there that was about $4. It was a pretty expensive shirt. And I said, man, Bob, you don't spend all your money on one shirt? And anyway, I bought a couple little shirts, and he bought that really neat shirt. And so he goes to school the next day, and believe it or not, one of the other kids had the same colored shirt. He never wore that shirt ever again. Anyway, now I want to talk to you just a little bit about his basketball. A lot of people did not know how good a basketball player he was. When he was an 8th grader, that's when the grade school first started playing competition sports with other schools. We never lost a game. Of course, I wasn't playing, I was just watching. I was so proud of my brother. He was really good on offensive rebounds and also good at stealing the ball and running down and making a basket. I mean, he would score like 16 points, and the rest of the kids make 1 or 2 points. He was really, really pretty good. Well, when he went to high school, first year of high school, the coach really wanted him to put him on the varsity. I actually wanted to put him on the varsity, but there was a lot of high school seniors that said that's not fair. And so the coach said, okay. Anyway, he played on the junior varsity, and they never lost a game. And when Terry was talking about him tipping that ball in the basket, I was there when that happened. And he could really jump. He could jump, and he was fast. He jumped up, and he was jumping against a kid that was a lot shorter than he was. He just popped it up like that, and right in the basket. And so that stopped the game for a while because they couldn't figure out whether that should score or not, you know? They couldn't figure whether that should be a score. Anyway, it was kind of interesting. But during this period of time, my mom decided to go give us 4 boys, the older boys, guitar lessons. So we started guitar lessons about the first part of August, and we was playing guitars, and all of a sudden when basketball season come along, it happened to be on the same night as the basketball game when Bob played in the junior varsity. And so we would go, and we would never go to the guitar lessons anymore. Here my mom thought we was going to be like the Alabamas or the Statler Brothers or something. Here we did become nothing. Anyway, our guitar lesson went by the wayside, and we watched Bob play all these fantastic basketball games. He was really, he would have made, I think he could have been a good basketball player if he had kept the coaching he had at Sandy High School and on. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say.
Well, I'm going to keep mine short. But I really enjoyed listening to the four boys. I really enjoyed listening to the four boys. It was wonderful. And Bob, of course, my outstanding memory for Bob is that he was always kind and thoughtful. I mean, I can't think of anything bad that he ever did. He was always wonderful. And a lot of the places where they lived, I know I visited him and Shirley there and had a lot of, he was always gracious, and one of our funnest trips was when Lisa and I flew down to Rusk, and Shirley and Lisa and I went down to the roller coaster. And of course I didn't like it, but they enjoyed it. And saw Bob there working at the hospital, and he was always gracious, always wonderful. So, but I do want to share. I asked Lisa, my daughter, if she had some memories that she wanted me to share today. So she sent me an email. She's in California. And Bob didn't have any daughters, so Lisa always felt special to him. So here's what she sent me. My first memories of Uncle Bob were at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Uncle Bob had a magical black book where stories about Debbie and me and my life were written. Debbie and I would sit quietly next to Uncle Bob while he told us stories about our lives. From that first memory on, I had a special place for Uncle Bob in my heart. He was the kindest uncle a girl could wish for. Through all my life growing up, up the years into adult years, he never changed. His sparkling eyes were always so full of love and care for whomever he was talking with. I feel so blessed to have had him for my uncle. Anyway, this has been wonderful today, and it's been nice to see everybody.
Well, my brother Bob, to me, was like the sunrise. He was quiet, but his presence in the room was warm and bright. If you had your back turned, you wouldn't hear him come into the room. If you were sitting across the room, you may hear his voice. But you were lucky enough to hear his voice, you would hear the stories that he would tell, or the jokes. Bob would take joy in small things. I remember his shirt collection, like Roger talked about. He made sure to buy a shirt pretty much from every destination. One special shirt was from Heavenly Valley Ski Resort. We shared joy of skiing. Several times we took family vacations together skiing. A little closer. One in particular was in Heavenly Valley. Bob and I had gone ahead of Bill and Shirley on the ski lift. At the top, Bob and I started chatting away because we were up there waiting for him, telling stories after stories after stories, and pretty soon somebody said, "There's a lady down there that broke her arm." and they took her to the medical clinic, and that was before cell phones. Shirley had broke her arm getting on the chairlift, and so we were sharing the stories while Shirley was having broken arm. Bob was always easygoing. He never made anyone unhappy. He wanted everyone around him to feel good and know that he was important to him. Sometimes it was just a smile that he gave us as he walked into the room. Sometimes it was a quiet conversation about a football game. Or sometimes the fact that it was a big event to show us the important event in my life, like my daughter's wedding or Bill's memorial service. He would travel a long ways to show you he cared and was there for me. I have precious memories of the time he lived in Modesto, him and Shirley. When he worked at the local school there, we would sit and talk on many evenings in our backyard and watch the sunset. The sun would set, leaving the sky warm and glowing, just like our hearts are today, warm and glowing with the memories of Bob that has left us. Thank you, Bob, for being my big brother.
Hello, I'm Dennis Meharry. My brother Bob's 9 years older than me, and he was extremely well, he's the type of person that on the farm he made life fun, work fun. If it wasn't fun, we'd do something else. But thinking about in the early mid-50s or a little bit later, when we moved to the farm, Dad and Mom Dad wanted to haul pea vines from the Blue Mountains, which up there they'd have the viners, and then you'd back your truck up and you'd fill up the truck with vines, and then the peas would come out the side, and that's what it was. It was, but it was hard work, but he always wanted to make things fun. So on going up there was fun, and getting on top of the pea line truck and moving the vines around to make it level and all that. But coming home, he would have, on the way home from the Blue Mountains down into our little farm, we'd come by this, the road that came out from Mountain Freewater to our home farm. There would be just a nice big cherry tree right there on the corner. And he would make sure that we could stop right there on that corner and get up there and level out the load. And pick a few cherries also. But he made life fun, work fun. It was a pleasure to be his brother, and I love him. And the last memories we had were over here at the nursing home. About over a year ago, we came up and visited Lauren, sorry. It was wonderful to be able to sit there and listen to him, and as we told stories back and forth and sang the Sabbath songs, he knew every word. He sang, and I was just so happy for him. And he kept saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go to heaven. And it was wonderful to see him happy and knowing that he was going to go to heaven. And I believe it. He's a good man. He was a good man. And he was a good man. And I was lucky, very lucky to be his brother.
I was in the first grade, and he was in college. And after school, one day, I was bored because we all went into Walla Walla College together, and I had to wait till everybody was ready, and then we'd all go home together. And I got bored, and I thought, I went into the Walla Walla College ad building, and I went clear up to the top, and I started peeking in all the rooms. And Bob came along, and he took my hand, and he was so kind. And he says, let's go home. He was a great brother. I looked up to him in many ways. When I was dean at Mount Alice Academy, he was the business manager at Monterey Bay Academy. We called each other many times about different things. And I really, really, really looked up to him, and he was a great brother in every way.
We asked Steve to represent Melvin's family, and Bob to represent Leroy's family. I'd like to invite Steve and Bob to come up at this time and share.
Good evening. It's my privilege to represent my father, Melvin, the oldest sibling of the Meharry tribe. Siblings. As you cousins are experiencing, it's a great loss. I still miss my dad. Anyway, if my dad were here, he'd probably say, oh, Brother Bob was a man after God's heart. God and church were first in his life, and a close second, if not even a second, was his family. I can remember him coming home in the evenings on the farm, and he'd say, folks, Grandma just said that Uncle Bob and Aunt Shirley and the boys are coming this weekend. And he was probably just as excited as we were to have his brother coming home. Or once in a while, he'd say, you know, I think we should go to Seattle and visit Uncle Bob and Aunt Shirley and the boys. And I can always remember that new house they had and how cool it was that they had their own private gym. Even after they got their key, it was really cool. Aunt Shirley and city cousins, my condolences from Brother Mike, Sister Jackie, Sister Trish, and Sister Debbie could not be here. And Aunt Dorothy, Debbie wanted me to share that same story about Uncle Bob's magic book. And I asked her what that meant. She goes, you know, I can't remember. I just know he'd say, Lisa and Debbie, come over here. I've got this book of family stories that I want to share with you. And so that is a special memory that Uncle Bob left with them. And to me, Uncle Bob, he was always kind. And when he talked to us nieces and nephews, he looked us in the eye and made us feel like he really took an interest in us. And I just loved how friendly and kind he always was.
Yeah, so after talking to my brothers and sisters, one of the things that we came up with was that when Uncle Bob talked to you, you felt like you were very special. The other thing is that my dad and mom had some troubles later on in life, and Uncle Bob was always the peacemaker. He would call us up and see what he could do to help us, make us feel better. He was truly an amazing guy.
So I'm a teacher, and I tell my kids a lot of stories. And one day I told the kids a story that they had found funny. And one of the kids raised their hand and said, "How do you have so many stories?" I said, "Because I lie." And they didn't like that answer, but the real reason I started to think about that, where do these stories come from? And the fact is, they came from my childhood and growing up, and I can attribute that to my dad. I wasn't born a Meharry, but I became one. And I was welcomed into the family as a Meharry. And it reminds me of one of Dad's favorite sayings from Africa, and they use it on the public transportation systems there. There's always room for one more, right? There's always room for one more Meharry. And I think Grandpa really, I can thank Grandpa and Grandma for that mentality, that, it doesn't matter where you come from, you're one of us. And I remember in particular one time, Sean and I were working on a school project together, and that was a terrible idea. I procrastinate. He's a perfectionist, so we wait till the last minute and then have to spend hours doing it. And for some reason, we had to build something, and we decided we wanted to build a car out of wood. And we were staying with Grandpa and Grandma in Modesto that weekend, and so at the last minute, like the night before we were supposed to leave and go back to school, we tell Grandpa we need help making this thing. So he actually took us down, rather than saying, we can't do that, it's too late. He took us down to the wood shop in Modesto, and we started building this thing. And he cut out the wheels. He was using a bandsaw, and on the last wheel, the blade on the bandsaw broke about a quarter into the wheel. And he searched up and down in that shop for another blade for that saw, and we couldn't find one. And Sean and I at that point, we're first, second grade, I think, and we were laying on the floor in the sawdust, just like, let's go home, But Grandpa didn't want to send us home with anything less than the best. And finally, he did give up, and I'm sure he had a talk with the shop teacher after that, because he turned that place upside down, or rather, the shop teacher had a word with him. But what he ended up doing was drilling out the rest of the wood to kind of get that thing to break off. And so we turned in our project. We got an A because we built some story about why this car had a wonky wheel, basically. But I just remember Grandpa not giving up on us and working with us, as long as it took.
So I need to remind you about the slideshow. There was one slide on that I think was probably the most important slide of the entire slideshow. It is the slide where Grandpa's holding the go-kart, and I'm in the go-kart. It really is the most important slide. And that one of my pivotal memories of Grandpa as a little child was that go-kart. I remember, to be honest, I'm not sure if this memory is an actual memory or if it's more a lot of people telling the story to me and it becomes a memory. But apparently, Grandpa brought the go-kart out and I wanted to drive it. And I couldn't reach the pedals unless I laid down. So I laid down and floored it. Can't see because I'm looking up in the air as I'm steering. And I think didn't I kind of go over a hay bale or something like that? A tire, yeah. Anyways, I hear that Grandpa actually had to chase after me in this go-kart and pull it back to kind of save my life or something, I don't know. So that was a very important slide. The other thing this is, again, I have weird memories. He saved my life, I'm sure. I've about died several times. So this other time, again, I have weird memories of Grandpa, but this one thing, and I wanted to bring the sunflower up because every time I see a sunflower, I think of Grandpa. Every single time. One time we were driving in North Dakota, and we were going by a sunflower field that had been fully bloomed, and he turned to me. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but Grandpa would turn and talk to you while he was driving. So he turned to me, And he says, you know, Tanya, every time I see these sunflowers, they just sing out to me and they go, pick me, pick me. And I can't, and the voice literally was that high, pick me, pick me. And I can't, every time I see a sunflower, I just hear Grandpa saying that. And it makes me giggle, and it brings a smile to my face. And so I have absolutely no idea what Grandpa's favorite flower was. I don't even know if he liked sunflowers at all. But to me, when I see a sunflower, I see Grandfather.
The memory I was going to talk about was also on the slideshow. I didn't know what year it was, but it told me 1998, which is 20 years ago. Grandpa took Jonathan and I on a road trip from Indiana to North Dakota in his truck. And I think he was moving his car there and leaving it because we took the train back. And he spent all of those hours with us, and it was the first time I ate donut holes, and we were able to climb through the bed of the truck into the front of the cab and then back, and he would just let us do our thing. But Grandpa always had an infectious smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye, and he was always looking towards the next thing. What's going to happen next? What's the next big thing that I'm looking forward to? He was always on to the next big adventure, and I definitely caught some of that spirit. We took a lot of trips together, a lot of adventures. And he always did the great migration of coming around and visiting us at least once a year with Grandma. And I have a lot of special memories in my heart, but that road trip was definitely an awesome memory for me. And it's awesome that the picture was there because I couldn't remember when it was, but it was. I appreciate Grandpa taking an 11 and a 13-year-old with us on a long road trip, and yeah, not knowing what food he was going to give us, but we did it, and it was amazing.
That's when I think of Grandpa, I think of that smile, and like he said, that twinkle in his eye, and I just get this warm feeling when I think of Grandpa. This is a lot harder when you actually start talking. But yeah, he just had this infectious kind of joy about life. And he, like Shri was saying, and like many of you were saying, he was always looking forward to the next thing, the next adventure, and he loved life, and he loved living it to the fullest, and he loved travel. He loved, I have the impression that he loved trucks. And I have this distinct memory of this period of time where he kept talking about this dual-wheeled truck that he wanted to get, and he was obsessed with this truck. And he just was saying, man, I want to get this dual-wheeled truck. And because he wanted to pull an RV that he was also going to get. And I just remember he always had something that he wanted, and I can relate to that because I always have a running list of things. And but he always had something, like I remember him talking about like a boat that he wanted to make, but it always